Hey, welcome to Outbuilding. Today we're going to talk a little bit about this box and why these redwood trees are sitting out here on the deck. This is a road trip story, and it involves some death and destruction, a little bit of birth and rejuvenation, and some friends along the way. So thanks for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you've come back to see another video, I really appreciate you coming back. And even furthermore, if you've subscribed, I really appreciate that. I'm having a lot of fun putting these videos together and sharing some of the things we're working on here out at the coast property and beyond. And that subscription helps me understand that people want to see more. So thank you.
The light is fading fast from this old town we gotta go. Our bags are packed, so what we waiting for? There's no point in delaying what we both already know. Escape this time with me. Escape this time with me.
Do a little bit of a road trip today. This is on behalf of my now deceased grandmother, Bayne. So Bayne was 100 years old last spring. I was able to get to her 100th birthday, and she lived a really, really long life, and she loved to travel. And so when she passed away later in the summer, we decided that we would plant some trees in her honor. And so we came here on a road trip down to Northern California to pick up some redwoods. And so we're visiting some of the relatives, if you will, of those trees, which are now about, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches tall. And Bayne was a tall woman. She was close to 6 feet tall, and she lived to be 100 years old. So these trees here live 20 times longer than she did at 100 years old. And they also are 50 times taller than she was. So it's hard to really show on video how much bigger these trees are than what you would normally see. And if you've not been to the redwoods, you should take a look. But I'm gonna walk a distance here, and you're gonna see as I walk, these things are, I don't know, 20, 30 feet around in diameter at the base. And we're not in some of the biggest ones here. We're just in a handful of them that are pretty big. And to give you a sense of perspective, I'm standing, these are old charred trees. They've withstood fire. They've withstood all kinds of different changes in weather. And as our climate sort of shifts to the north with climate change, we're gonna plant these up in Oregon, which is not too far from here. It's about 3 hours from where I'm standing. And there aren't native redwoods up there, but there are many, many big trees. And these trees are pretty hardy. They live in a lot of different climates. When we were at the nursery talking to the gentleman who sold them to us, he said that they've lived in a number of really diverse climates. And so we're anticipating that they will grow perhaps not as big as this, and we won't certainly be around to see them when they do, but they will be big and resilient because they are adaptive to different climates. I'm not sure if you can see this, but looking up at the sky, it's blue sky day. There's just a handful of small clouds, no moisture, and there's actually a weather system in the trees here. It's creating rain, and it's raining down. Dew is condensing and dropping out of the trees. So it's actually a weather system inside the canopy of these trees. Our next stop was Jonsteen Farms. We weren't sure how big 60 trees would be, so we brought along a little trailer, which I'll cover in a separate video, but we didn't really need to bring a trailer, it turns out. When you visit a web-only company, it's always interesting to see what it looks like because you have an impression from the website. And similarly, the people at Jonsteen's probably don't usually see their customers face-to-face, so it was really nice. They were super helpful and willing to let us video and kind of introduce ourselves to them and them to us. Hey.
Hey,
We're here to get some trees.
welcome to Jonsteen headquarters.
He's raising their hand.
So 3 questions.
No, it'll take about 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah, it's great. With 60 of them, we have about 40 acres, about 20 of it we know just for the forest. The rest is already got big Sitka spruce and a lot of oak growth, so it's pretty well treated.
Yeah.
We had about too much coffee that morning, and it took about 20 minutes for them to prepare the trees for transportation. We asked a bunch of questions, kind of watched their process, and looked around, snooped around the place a little bit. So what is that? What are you doing with them there? Just rinsing them off?
This is mixture of, it's the exact mixture, but it basically is getting rid of certain funguses and molds.
Oh,
on
okay.
certain
So it's like
species.
it's a disinfectant of sorts.
Yeah.
I would avoid planting on ridges. I don't know if that's an option for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because wind and wind
Yeah.
flagging is an issue with these guys.
It's pretty. I mean, gladly we have the other trees to indicate, and they're not like And so, with probably too many questions graciously answered, we climbed back in the Jeep with our new trees and stopped one more time to say hello to our favorite Jonsteen residents, and then headed north towards Oregon. All right, we're on the drive back, and there's this. We just saw this as we were driving, and I thought I'd stop and shoot a little video because there's sort of two choices we have in terms of managing the forest. This is mechanized forestry, so this is what goes on that makes the studs in your house and all the beams and everything that likely are part of where you live. What we do as a population of mechanized forestry is we just come in and we clear cut, and this is just completely eviscerated, and then we come in and poison the whole thing to avoid invasive species. And when I say poison, we use a relatively benign, basically antifoliant that kills everything in a season, biodegrades and goes away. And then they come in and do a mechanized planting, and they plant about every 7 feet. So that's a density of about 400 trees per acre. And that's what forestry practice will do. And they'll put in one kind of tree. Those trees will compete to grow really, really tall and straight so that there's good clear grain all the way up. And that creates sort of a monoculture of one kind of tree that is very harvestable and has a lot of property value or value from a forestry perspective. There's another route that is becoming more popular, and that's a conservation route. And the standard for that is a lot lower. It's about 200 trees per acre, which is about every 15 feet. The redwoods we just bought need to grow at about 20-foot intervals because they're such big trees. But that tends to be a much more mixed variety of trees and habitat, so a really diverse habitat, which is better in terms of resiliency, so it's better able to manage fire. It doesn't all die at the same point. However, it's not as valuable for timber because that doesn't become merchantable timber, because that broader spacing means you've got more branching on the trees and a different kind of tree shape. And so it's not good for forestry, but it's good for the planet, and it's good for the species of things that go through there, the insects, the populations of different animals. And it's more resilient because you've got a diverse number of kinds of trees. And so if the climate should get warmer or colder, drier or more wet, you've got something that can better adapt to that. So I'm not really trying to pick a position here. I'm just kind of explaining the choice that we've chosen for the property that we have. We're going to try to, it's got a lot of old growth on it. There's no reason to eviscerate the whole thing and come in and plant it as a crop, because that's not what our goals are. Our goals are to maintain the elk herd that go through there, habitat for other things, and hopefully these redwoods, if the climate does shift more north, which it seems like it's doing, those redwoods over time may prevail over some of the other trees that maybe don't do as well because it's not as cold anymore. This is just a really good demonstration. If you see off in the distance, there are older, taller trees. They tend to be about 30 or 40-year-old before they get harvested when they're done in this highly mechanized way. And then they'll turn this over, and this will be planted with little tiny seedlings, not unlike the ones we just bought, fairly soon in the next year or so. Anyway, just a good demonstration as we're driving north. So now you know how these came to be on the porch and why we got them. And now we're going to go start working on planting them. And this is something that's new to us. And so we've asked a lot of questions when we were at the nursery. We have read online and tried to understand the best we can. But for those of you that have done more of this or that have a background in forestry or understand trees, please make comments and leave them below. We're going to plant a couple today, but we've got 2 weeks in which to plant the majority of these. And we can take from some of those comments and improve our process a little bit. We're going to be doing this over and over again as we reforest this area, so we will learn as we go. Okay, to get started here, this is kind of what we're dealing with in certain areas. So like I said, the property has got some very treed and forested areas, and they tend to show really good health when they have huckleberry growing inside the canopy underneath. That kind of indicates that it's sort of mature and the trees are big enough to shelter out the blackberry and the Scotch broom. The areas that were left, that were sort of abandoned, fully just exposed to dirt, have grown up to this ridiculous thatch of, like, this is Scotch broom that's probably 15 feet tall, blackberry, and it's kind of daunting when you first look at it. It's a little bit like, I was a marathoner for quite a while, and the first time you go think about running a marathon is hard, but then you just get out and start running, and it comes pretty quickly. And that's been true for this too. Like once you kind of find an edge and go in and work, you can take out the most of the material. I'll chip up the woody bits and use that as mulch around the trees. And then I'm finding two tools to be the most useful. One is a pole saw that I can reach in quite a ways into the blackberries and cut out things. And if I head for these big tall Scotch broom and cut them down and pull them out, then the blackberries come out pretty quickly. And for those, I'm using a blade that looks a little bit like a lawnmower blade, and it's sharp, and it can just obliterates all the vines. So you can kind of just use it like a scythe and work through it. My strategy here is to kind of not do it wholesale, but get the bulk of it out and build little areas, little rings that we can plant in. And we're going to use some of this blackberry and other bramble to kind of protect those trees for the first year or two. So we'll kind of manage those and walk in and keep them cleared out, but protect them. So I've also got some mulch, and we'll mulch out an area hopefully to abate some of the growth of new things and also keep moisture in there because this is relatively exposed to the sun. This is just one area. I'm going to work on this at kind of that density of about 20 trees or 20 feet between trees, roughly speaking. And I'll put kind of a batch of redwoods in here, and then we'll pick some other areas to do those. We're going to also transplant a lot of small trees that are in those healthy areas with the huckleberry out to the edges and kind of keep working our way out. So I'll give you a little demo of what this looks like. And like I say, it's daunting at first, but I've got good gear. You need really good gloves. I've got super thick gloves because of the blackberries. And if you sort of get fully kitted up and throw the shield on and just kind of get into it, it goes pretty well. Okay, so I'm about probably an hour and a half, 2 hours in today, and I've been able to make pretty good progress. There's a handful of observations I'll make. One of them is this kind of comes in waves. There's areas that are pretty open and are pretty easy to get through quickly, and then areas that are really dense. I'm pulling out enough Scotch broom that I think it makes sense to mulch it just in place right locally here and then reuse it for mulch, because then I don't have to schlep the mulch back and forth. I'm leaving some of this, I forget the name of this, or the forester mentioned it, and I need to look it up and I'll put it in the description. It's a prickly bit, but it's not anywhere near as bad as blackberry. We noticed it in the California redwoods. There's a similar plant there along with the huckleberry, and so I think that's a sign of a good thing to keep established. It does leaf out, and it's just starting to bud a little bit in December here. So it will create, I hope, a little bit of coverage for shade for the trees. And I'm gonna probably need more batteries for the tools, and then also maybe even 2 sets of tools, because I find myself switching back and forth between cutting the Scotch broom and then eviscerating the blackberry with the flail or the blade. So I think it may make more sense to eventually have both those tools, and then when both of us are working, we can work together as well. So I'm gonna go switch and get some plants now. I've got 8 little zones prepared at kind of roughly 20-foot intervals, some sort of hatch of bugs going off here. One other observation is this is sort of boutique forestry, because there's no way you could do this at a scale that we need to do to provide the lumber and timber that we use for building homes and doing things that we do in everyday life. And so there is a place probably for mechanized, big whole-scale crop-based forestry. We just really feel like this is an area to preserve, and it's an interface zone between the climates and stuff like that. So we're doing, probably way more labor, physical labor, and doing it probably the harder way without any herbicides or anything. But that's kind of by choice, and we recognize that there's probably a very good place for both of those approaches.
Blessing the hole with its native bits. Tease out the roots a little bit. And plant it right about at the level that it was in its plug. Let's go, guy.
All right, we haven't come up with a clever way yet to mark these, but we do want to kind of mark them and keep track. So we'll come back and we'll catch a GPS spot and keep a little log of our trees. That obviously is not going to work. I've got some scrap wood here I brought along to at least get something marked, and then we'll keep track of them. It'll be fun to look back at these over time, because we're going to be planning for several years here and start to judge how much these have grown, and we can do an update video and show you at some point how things are going. There's two more things we'll probably do as a precaution with these, and maybe see over time. The nursery said that in the spring the deer may be interested in nibbling on these, which we're not so interested in, so we might put some cages around them. And then we'll definitely mulch pretty heavily these whole areas. And I've got some mulch here in a bucket, but I'm gonna bring the tractor up and grind up the Scotch broom I was pulling out and use it to mulch. We'll want to do this pretty pervasively to try to keep these nice and moist, and hopefully hold back some of the invasive stuff and the weeds.